secularism's mistake is to think you can find meaning under the sun. Here's the problem with that. If we're all just matter, then why does anything matter? Be honest about it. I appreciate the atheist you are. Now, we've been talking about how Jesus is training us to do what he did. There's one thing he never trained his apprentices to do, because only he could make a way to God. Only he could do that. Only he could offer perfect righteousness in exchange for our unrighteousness. So we cannot do that. But what is true is that every apprentice of Jesus was trained to live on purpose like he did. That every single disciple is to live a commissioned life. Every gospel ends with Jesus giving his disciples a commission. John ends like this: as the Father has sent me, I am sending you. This is not a burden. This is a blessing, because Jesus is setting us free from living a life with no reason to do so. Look at what Peter said. For you know that God paid a ransom to save you from the empty life you inherited from your ancestors. See, Jesus isn't just giving us life after death. He's giving us life before life after death. Life that's not empty like everyone else is living. You've heard me mention Lee Strobel many times, a well-known Christian apologist. But Lee, as a young man, was an ardent atheist. He had no use for God. He was into journalism as his career. He was good at it. He won a number of awards for the Chicago Tribune. His wife became a believer. She found a church called Willow Creek, and she started following Jesus, and it really upset Lee. He was bound and determined to research Christianity and prove it wrong. Well, during this season, he's writing for the Tribune, and he needs to look up an article he wrote a year earlier. It's hard to remember this age, but it was before computers. So he had to go down to the basement where they saved all the old papers. And he told the woman what he's looking for, and she took him to a file cabinet and said, I've got a drawer just for you. And she opened it, and there, neatly folded, were all the articles she'd ever written. And he said they were already fraying on the edges and turning yellow. And in that moment, something just hit me. And I thought, this is my life? I'm killing myself for this, for a file of yellow papers. And something deep inside him said, there's got to be more than this. Look again at that verse in another translation. You were saved from that useless life. One reason the fear of dying that we talked about last week is so enslaving is because most people don't have a good reason for living. But our rabbi has freed us from the captivity of futility, and he's trained us to live on purpose because we have a purpose for living. Let's talk a little more about this kind of freedom. What does it mean? Well, it means, number one, that my life has meaning. Now, I've been a pastor a long time. For over 4 decades, I've seen people have all kinds of problems. And I've always been bewildered why people with huge problems could live with joy. And people with little problems could be totally miserable. And it finally dawned on me, it has nothing to do with the size of the problem. That people are unhappy not because of the largeness of their problems, but because of the smallness of their goals. And when you spend your life playing Trivial Pursuit, you're going to lose and be miserable. There's a book in the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes, written by King Solomon. Solomon set out to find what could give him joy without God. He said, I set myself out to gain wealth, and I did. I was richer than anyone I knew. I set myself out to do great projects, and I did them, and I built them, and I decided I would gain knowledge. I don't know anyone that studied more than me. I decided I would deny myself no pleasure, no food. I would have more sex than any man alive. I did it all, he said. And here's what he decided. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. And when I had surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, Everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. Notice that phrase, under the sun. He's trying to live as a secularist. He's trying to live without God. And secularism's mistake is to think you can find meaning under the sun. Here's the problem with that. If we're all just matter, okay, we're all just a few billion years of evolved scum. If we're just matter, then why does anything matter? Be honest about it. I appreciate the atheist you are. One of the greatest philosophers and logicians of the last century, Bertrand Russell from UK, said, unless you assume a God, the question of life's purpose is meaningless. I appreciate the honesty. If there is no God, then stop the nonsense of saying life has meaning. You're just an accident. You're not supposed to be here, and the universe won't care when you're gone. One of the greatest scientists of the last generation was Stephen Hawking. He wrote, we're just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star. That is perfect under the sun logic. So why is it so unsatisfying? Why do we not deep down in our core want to accept the obvious implication of secularism? When I was in college, I heard a preacher from Southern California who had a member in his church that taught law at the University of Southern California Law School. He taught beginning law students. First day of class, he would start this way every time. Why are you in my class? Well, because it's a sign we have to take it. What then? We'll take other classes we have to take. What then? Well, we'll try to graduate from law school. What then? Well, we'll try to pass the bar exam. What then? We'll try to get hired by a law firm. What then? Well, we'll try to succeed, maybe make partner. What then? Well, we'll try to make a lot of money. What then? Well, we'll retire and have a nice, easy life. What then? And frustrated student would always say, well, we'll die. And this brilliant professor would say, what then? What then? Something deep inside us wants an answer to that question. What then? And here's why. Solomon said, God has planted eternity in the human heart. Meaning can only be found above the sun. If in fact we are divinely created creatures, then only our Creator can tell us what we were created for. Colossians says, for in Him all things were created. All things have been created through Him and for Him. So we exist for the glory and the mission of God. And we find our meaning when we live in alignment with that assignment. That's why Jesus said, seek the kingdom of God above all else. Let nothing in your life be more important. Get in alignment with the kingdom of God. That's how you were created. And here's why people are so frustrated. They want to live for their own kingdoms. We've bought the false narrative of self-sovereignty. And I am going to live my life building my empire. And you're going to be frustrated because 8 billion other people are trying to do the same thing. And ultimately, the universe doesn't recognize your empire. It doesn't recognize the legitimacy of your reign. You and I don't own a kingdom. And spending our lives trying to build one is just going to be depressingly futile. Here's the reality. You can try to glorify your name and bring honor to yourself and amass and acquire all you want. But your empire is going to start to crumble and deteriorate and be dismissed before the mud on your burial plot is dry. You don't own a kingdom. But I know who does. And what gives life meaning is when I know I can invest it in a mission and in a kingdom that can never be frustrated or eliminated. Here's the big idea. That no other kingdom can surpass or usurp the reign of Christ. And when Jesus says, follow me, He's inviting his apprentices to believe in the future of Jesus' kingdom with so much passion and conviction, you will tie your own future to it. But here's why that can be hard. There's this mystery that God is allowing, and the mystery is this: God is allowing at this present time opposition to the reign of Christ. And so what we see is all these other kingdoms out there, and they're getting a lot more publicity. And the people building them are getting a lot more applause. See, Jesus said, my kingdom's like a mustard seed. And what we have to decide is, did everything Jesus say about his kingdom and what it's going to become, is that true? Or should I just give myself to these other kingdoms?